Margaret Lewis, an elderly black woman with deep wrinkles carved by years of life's hard work, walks into a local grocery store in a small town in Alabama. The early afternoon sun casts long shadows across the parking lot as she pushes the door open, its little bell ringing softly. Margaret, despite her age and modest clothing, carries herself with a quiet dignity that commands respect. She is wearing a simple floral dress and an old pair of worn-out shoes, her gray hair neatly tied in a bun. Her brown skin shines under the store's fluorescent lights, though her tired hands, calloused from decades of labor, give away a life that hasn't always been easy. As she strolls through the aisles, customers pass by her without a second glance, unaware of her true identity. She stops occasionally to inspect a product or pick up a few essentials: milk, bread, fresh vegetables. Her pace is slow, not from laziness, but the weight of her years. What no one in the store seems to realize is that Margaret isn't just another customer. She is, in fact, the original founder of this very supermarket, which she built alongside her late husband nearly 40 years ago. Together, they had transformed what was once a small corner store into the successful local chain that now served the community. After her husband passed away, Margaret stepped back from the business, leaving it in the hands of managers she trusted. Though she no longer had an active role in its day-to-day operations, she often visited the store to observe how things were running, preferring to do so anonymously. The employees, now younger and unaware of her history, saw her as just another elderly customer. She never corrected them. She wasn't one to boast or seek recognition. For Margaret, seeing the store thrive was enough. However, on this particular afternoon, things were about to take a dramatic turn. At the checkout counter, Camille Turner stands impatiently, scanning items with robotic precision. Camille is in her early 20s, tall and impeccably dressed, with a face that is often hardened by her ambition. Her dark hair is slicked back into a tight ponytail, and her makeup is sharp and meticulously applied. For Camille, this job is a temporary inconvenience, just a stepping stone to something bigger. She doesn't care about the customers or the store's history. To her, it's all about clocking in, earning her paycheck, and moving on to what she believes are greater things. As Margaret approaches the register, Camille barely looks up from her phone, her thumb scrolling through social media. Without greeting the older woman, she begins ringing up the groceries in silence, her long nails tapping rhythmically on the scanner. The line behind Margaret begins to grow, but Camille doesn't seem to notice or care. Margaret, accustomed to kindness from most people in the town, tries to strike up a conversation. "Good afternoon, dear. It's a nice day out, isn't it?" Camille doesn't respond. She glances up briefly with a half-hearted smile, more of an obligatory gesture than a real acknowledgement, and returns to her task. Margaret's brow furrows slightly, but she remains polite. She notices that a few of the items Camille scanned have visible flaws: a bruised apple, a leaking milk carton. "Excuse me, sweetheart," Margaret says softly. "This apple looks a little bruised, and I think this milk might be leaking. Would you mind checking?" Camille rolls her eyes, the frustration evident in her body language. Without masking her irritation, she snaps, "Lady, do you want it or not? I don't have time to swap out every little thing for you." A few customers nearby glance over, sensing the tension. Margaret, taken aback by the rudeness, stays calm but firm. "I understand you're busy, but I'd appreciate it if you could just switch these out for fresh ones." With an exaggerated sigh, Camille snatches the apple and milk from the counter. "Fine," she mutters under her breath as she storms off to replace the items. Her attitude reeks of entitlement, and it's clear she sees Margaret as nothing more than a bothersome old woman wasting her time. Little does she know, the woman she's dismissing so carelessly holds the fate of her job in her hands. Margaret waits patiently as Camille returns with the fresh items, but the tension lingers in the air. Camille drops the new apple and milk onto the counter with an audible thud, her frustration palpable. Without a word, she resumes scanning the rest of the groceries, moving more quickly and carelessly than before. Margaret, always one for grace, maintains her calm demeanor, though she can feel the eyes of other customers on her. Camille's irritation is impossible to miss. As Margaret reaches for her wallet, she feels a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Camille's expression turns from annoyance to outright disdain. "It's gonna be $28, Camille says flatly, her tone clipped and uninviting. Margaret opens her old, weathered purse, hands trembling slightly as she counts out her bills. One by one, she lays the cash on the counter, and it's clear that Camille is growing more impatient by the second. The younger woman's fingers tap rhythmically on the counter, a clear sign of her irritation. Margaret accidentally drops a coin, and as it rolls under the counter, she bends down slowly, her body protesting the movement. "Oh, come on," Camille mutters under her breath, though loud enough for Margaret and those around to hear. She leans over the counter, looking down at Margaret with a sneer. "If you don't have enough money, maybe you shouldn't be buying all this stuff. Some people have places to be." Margaret's face flushes with embarrassment, and several customers nearby glance over in shock. The whispers start almost immediately, a low murmur spreading through the small crowd. Margaret retrieves the coin and stands back up, her composure shaken but not broken. She looks at Camille, her eyes reflecting both hurt and resolve. "I'm not short on money, dear," Margaret says, her voice steady despite the situation. "And there's no need to rush. We all have places to be." But Camille doesn't back down. Instead, she raises her voice. "Look, lady, I'm just saying, if you can't keep up, maybe you should go shop somewhere else." The humiliation in front of everyone is complete, and Margaret's heart aches not just for herself, but for the arrogance and disrespect that seems to have infected this young woman. Yet, Margaret says nothing more, simply handing over the last bill with her usual quiet dignity. The cash register beeps, the transaction is completed, but the damage is done. Other customers, witnessing the scene, exchange uneasy looks, unsure whether to intervene. The tension is thick, but no one steps in. Margaret gathers her bags, her hands shaking slightly, but she holds her head high. As she turns to leave, her heart heavy with the weight of the moment, she catches a glimpse of the store manager, Antoine, walking toward the register. As Margaret moves to leave, her steps slow and deliberate, Antoine, the store manager, strides up to the checkout lane. Antoine is a man in his mid-40s, dressed in the sharp, professional attire of a manager who takes pride in the establishment. He's known Margaret for years, and while most employees are unaware of the store's origins, Antoine has always respected her as the true founder of this place. His face immediately tightens as he notices the discomfort in Margaret's posture and the uncomfortable hush among the customers. He moves directly toward Camille, his eyes narrowing as he approaches. Camille, still oblivious to what's happening, doesn't immediately notice him. She's too busy rolling her eyes at another customer who had asked for a price check, her mood sour from the encounter with Margaret. "Camille," Antoine says, his voice sharp enough to cut through the tension in the air. She jumps slightly, surprised by his sudden presence. Her annoyance quickly turns into forced professionalism. "Oh hey, Antoine. What's up?" Camille responds, trying to maintain her usual air of indifference, but failing to mask her anxiety. She can feel the intensity of his gaze on her, and it makes her uneasy. Antoine looks at Margaret, standing quietly with her grocery bags in hand, then back at Camille. The store grows even quieter as nearby customers and staff realize something significant is about to unfold. "Do you have any idea who this woman is?" Antoine asks, his tone steady but filled with an undercurrent of authority. Camille glances at Margaret, confused, before turning back to Antoine with a shrug. Just some lady who was being slow at the checkout," Camille says dismissively. "Why? Did I miss something?" Antoine's expression hardens. "This lady, as you put it, is Margaret Lewis. She's the founder of this store. The very store you're working in right now exists because of her." The color drains from Camille's face as the weight of Antoine's words sinks in. Her mouth opens slightly in disbelief, her arrogance suddenly evaporating into panic. The customers standing nearby widen their eyes, some whispering in astonishment as they take in this new revelation. "What?" Camille stammers, her voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't know." Antoine doesn't soften his stance. "No, you didn't. And that's exactly the problem. You treated her with disrespect, humiliated her in front of everyone. If you had any sense of decency, it wouldn't matter who she was. You shouldn't treat anyone like that. Margaret stands quietly, watching the scene unfold. There's no satisfaction in her eyes, just a calm, collected demeanor. She had endured the humiliation, and now the truth had come to light, but she wasn't one for public displays of triumph. Camille's face turns red as she realizes the gravity of her mistake. Her heart races, and a cold sweat begins to form on her forehead. She stammers an apology. I didn't mean to. I didn't know. Please, I'm sorry. But the damage has been done. Margaret remains silent, though her eyes meet Antoine's with a quiet understanding. The entire store seems to be holding its breath, waiting for what comes next. Camille stands frozen, her mind racing, trying to grasp the full weight of the situation. The revelation that the woman she had just humiliated is the founder of the store hits her like a ton of bricks. She feels her chest tighten as panic and regret start to overwhelm her. Her carefully curated sense of control, the facade of superiority, crumbles before the reality she now faces. I didn't know, I swear. Camille blurts out, her voice shaky as she turns to Margaret. Her expression is a mix of shock and fear, her earlier arrogance completely gone. Please, I'm really sorry. But the apology feels hollow, like it's born more from fear of losing her job than genuine remorse. Margaret's face is calm, unreadable. She holds her shopping bags tightly, watching Camille's flustered attempt to backtrack, but she says nothing. It's not in her nature to react out of anger, even when she's been deeply wronged. Antoine crosses his arms, his stern gaze never leaving Camille. It's not just about who she is, Camille. You should treat all customers with respect, regardless of their background. You've been rude before, but this is unacceptable. Camille swallows hard. She can feel the eyes of customers and other employees on her, each one silently judging her. Her face flushes, not just from embarrassment, but from the sinking realization that this could very well cost her everything. In her mind, this job was always temporary, a stepping stone to something better. But now, the future she had imagined seems to be slipping away from her in real time. I know, Camille stammers, her voice becoming more desperate. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I've just been stressed. I really didn't know who she was. Please, give me another chance. Antoine raises an eyebrow, unimpressed by her excuses. Stress doesn't justify treating people poorly. What you did today wasn't just rude, it was cruel. You embarrassed someone publicly. Margaret remains quiet, her eyes locked on Camille, though they carry no malice. Camille, overwhelmed, tries to salvage what little dignity she has left. I'll make it right. I swear I will, she says, her voice cracking. The employees behind Camille have gathered around, whispering to one another, and the customers, some already halfway through their transactions, have paused to see what will happen next. The tension in the store is thick, and Camille feels like she's standing in the center of a storm. Every second feels longer than the last. Margaret finally speaks, her voice calm and measured. Everyone makes mistakes, Camille, but it's how we learn from them that matters. The simplicity of her words cuts through the chaos swirling in Camille's mind. She nods, but there's little comfort in knowing she might have just ruined any future she had in the store. All she can do now is wait to see what decision will be made. The air inside the supermarket feels heavier as everyone waits for Margaret to make her next move. Camille stands at the checkout, visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she clasps them together. Her eyes dart nervously between Antoine and Margaret, silently pleading for a chance to undo the damage she caused. Margaret, however, remains composed, her face betraying little emotion as she looks at the young woman before her. Antoine takes a step forward, ready to speak up, but Margaret gently raises her hand, signaling him to hold off. She isn't one to make hasty decisions, and her thoughtful nature shows as she takes a deep breath before addressing Camille. Young lady, Margaret begins, her voice steady but with a softness that commands attention. I've seen a lot in my years, more than you could probably imagine. Respect isn't just something you give to people you think are important. It's something you give to everyone, no matter who they are. Camille nods quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. I understand, she whispers, her voice cracking with the weight of her regret. "I know I was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. Please, give me another chance to make things right." Margaret studies Camille for a long moment. It's clear that Camille is shaken, and while her apology might stem from fear of the consequences, there's a glimmer of sincerity. Margaret is no stranger to mistakes. After all, she built this business on second chances. She knows that people, especially the young, sometimes stumble before they can grow. But actions must have consequences. "I'm not going to fire you," Margaret says finally, her voice firm. A collective sigh of relief seems to ripple through the small crowd of employees and customers. Camille's shoulders visibly relax, but before she can fully process the words, Margaret continues, "However, you will no longer be working at the register." Camille's heart drops again. "What do you mean?" she asks, her voice almost pleading. "You're going to start working as a janitor here in the store," Margaret says calmly, her eyes steady on Camille. "You'll be responsible for cleaning the floors, scrubbing the restrooms, and taking care of the trash. It's hard, honest work. Something I think you might need to understand." Camille blinks, stunned by the decision. "But I've never done that kind of work before," she stammers, realizing the humiliation that will come with her new role. Margaret's expression softens slightly, but there's no wavering in her decision. Sometimes it's important to see things from a different perspective. Maybe this will help you understand what it feels like to be in someone else's shoes. Antoine nods in agreement, though his expression remains serious. "Consider this an opportunity to learn and reflect, Camille," he adds. "It's not a punishment. It's a chance to grow." Camille's face flushes with a mix of emotions. The embarrassment of cleaning floors in front of her colleagues is almost unbearable, but deep down, she knows she doesn't have a choice. She nods, her voice barely audible as she murmurs, "Thank you." Margaret offers a faint smile, but it's one of understanding, not triumph. "We all make mistakes, Camille. It's how we respond to them that matters most. I hope you use this time to think about that." With that, Margaret turns to leave, her shopping bags in hand. The crowd of onlookers disperses slowly, leaving Camille standing at the register, a new reality settling in around her. She's been given a second chance, but it will come at a cost. The hard work and humility that lie ahead may be her only path to redemption. The following morning, Camille arrives at the store much earlier than she ever had before. The sky is still dark, with the faintest hint of dawn peeking through, and the parking lot is mostly empty. Normally, she would strut into work just a few minutes before her shift started, but today is different. Today, she begins her new role as the janitor. She pushes open the back door of the store, where the cleaning supplies are stored. The faint smell of disinfectant fills the air as she walks in, her steps hesitant and uncertain. Gone are the polished nails and fashionable outfits. She's dressed in plain jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair tied back loosely. Camille feels the weight of her pride hanging over her as she picks up the mop and bucket, trying to suppress the surge of embarrassment that rises in her chest. The store is still quiet as she begins her first task, cleaning the floors. The once familiar aisles feel different now, seen from the perspective of someone responsible for their upkeep, not just someone passing through on the way to the checkout counter. The work is physical, far more demanding than scanning items at the register. With each push of the mop, Camille's muscles ache and sweat gathers on her brow. As she moves up and down the aisles, her mind races with thoughts of how far she has fallen. The humiliation of being demoted in front of her coworkers still stings, and she knows they'll see her mopping floors soon enough. She's always valued appearances, and the thought of them watching her scrub the floors makes her stomach churn. It isn't long before the first few employees start arriving for their shifts. They pass her with cautious glances, a few offering awkward greetings. Camille feels their eyes on her but keeps her head down, focusing on the task at hand. She tells herself it's just temporary, a means to an end, but the reality is hard to swallow. As the morning progresses, customers begin trickling into the store. Camille keeps to the back aisles at first, avoiding the public eye, but eventually, she can't hide. A customer she recognizes from her time at the register passes by, looking confused to see her in this new role. Camille pretends not to notice, though her heart pounds in her chest. At one point, as she's emptying the trash near the produce section, A young mother with her child approaches her. The woman doesn't seem to recognize Camille, which is a small relief. "Excuse me, could you help me reach something on the top shelf?" The woman asks politely, pointing to a box of cereal just out of her reach. Camille pauses for a second, caught off guard by the request. She used to be the one giving orders or dismissing requests, not fulfilling them. But now, without a trace of her old arrogance, she nods and steps forward, retrieving the box and handing it to the woman. "Thank you," the woman says with a warm smile. "I really appreciate it." Camille mutters a quiet, "You're welcome," before turning back to her work. The interaction is simple, but it stays with her as she continues through the rest of her shift. Maybe this new role, as humbling as it is, will teach her more than she expected. Maybe there's more to life than the position or status she once clung to. The hours pass slowly, but by the end of the day, Camille is exhausted. Her back aches, her arms are sore, and her hands, once manicured and pristine, are red and raw from scrubbing and mopping. Yet, as she leaves the store that evening, there's a strange sense of accomplishment in her heart. She survived her first day, and for the first time in a long time, she's beginning to understand the value of hard work, the kind of work she had always taken for granted. Days turn into weeks, and Camille settles into her new role, though the sting of her fall from grace still lingers. Each morning, she arrives early, taking on tasks she never thought she would, like scrubbing the bathrooms, emptying trash bins, and mopping up spills. At first, she resents every minute of it. The work is backbreaking, and the humiliation of being seen in such a lowly position gnaws at her pride. However, as time goes on, something begins to shift within her. During her breaks, Camille sits alone in the back of the store, quietly eating her lunch while reflecting on everything that's happened. Her mind drifts to the days she spent as a cashier, when she had looked down on customers like Margaret and ignored the struggles of her coworkers. She had always viewed herself as above them, believing her ambition would take her far beyond the confines of the store. But now, she can see things more clearly. One afternoon, as Camille is cleaning the break room, she overhears a conversation between two other employees, Janet and Carlos. They're talking about their families, about the challenges of raising kids while juggling long hours at work. Camille pauses, her hands still clutching the mop, as she listens. She realizes that, while she was focused on her own upward climb, she never took the time to understand the people she worked with. To her, they were just faces, names on a schedule. But now, hearing their struggles, she feels a pang of guilt. Later that day, as she's sweeping the front of the store, Camille watches customers pass by. She notices the elderly man who always buys the same loaf of bread, the single mother with 2 kids who carefully counts out every dollar, and the tired factory worker picking up groceries after his shift. These are the people she used to dismiss so easily. Now, she sees them as individuals, each with their own story, their own challenges. And for the first time, Camille feels something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: empathy. The real turning point comes during a quiet moment when she's cleaning the restrooms. As she scrubs the sink, her reflection catches her eye in the mirror. She looks at herself, really looks, and sees not just the physical changes, the dirt under her nails or the sweat on her forehead, but the emotional transformation she's undergone. She barely recognizes the person she was just a few weeks ago, the arrogant cashier who thought she was too good for this kind of work. Camille's mind turns back to Margaret, the woman she had humiliated. That moment plays over and over in her head, each time filling her with more regret. She remembers the look on Margaret's face, not anger, but disappointment. Camille had tried to brush it off at first, but now it haunts her. She wishes she could go back and undo what she did, but she knows that's impossible. The only thing left is to make amends, somehow. By the time her shift ends, Camille is emotionally and physically drained. As she walks out of the store, she pauses for a moment and looks back at the entrance. This place, which had once been just a stepping stone to something bigger, now feels like a mirror of her own personal journey. Camille knows she still has a long way to go, but for the first time, she's ready to take responsibility for her actions and for the hurt she's caused. She decides that tomorrow, she will find a way to talk to Margaret, not to save her job, but to apologize from the heart. She knows it won't be easy, but if she's learned anything during this time, it's that real growth comes from facing your mistakes head-on. The following day, Camille walks into the store with a new sense of purpose. Her shift begins the same way it has for the past few weeks, cleaning floors, emptying trash, and tidying up the aisles. But today, her mind is elsewhere. She's been rehearsing what she will say to Margaret, trying to find the right words. It isn't just about clearing her conscience. It's about genuinely apologizing to the woman she had wronged so deeply. As the day wears on, Camille keeps an eye out for Margaret, hoping to catch her during one of her usual quiet visits to the store. By mid-afternoon, her opportunity arrives. She spots Margaret near the produce section, inspecting a display of tomatoes. Camille's heart races. The elderly woman seems as poised and graceful as always, her movements deliberate, as if she's taking in every detail around her. Gathering her courage, Camille walks over, her palms sweaty and her chest tight. She feels a lump forming in her throat as she approaches, but she knows this is something she has to do. Margaret, sensing someone approaching, looks up, her calm eyes meeting Camille's. "Mrs. Lewis?" Camille starts, her voice trembling slightly. Margaret's expression remains neutral, though there's a hint of recognition in her gaze. "Yes, dear," Margaret replies softly, her tone gentle but guarded. Camille takes a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how I treated you, and about all the things I said. I was wrong, completely wrong, and I'm so sorry." Margaret studies her for a long moment, her face unreadable. The silence stretches between them, making Camille's nerves spike even more. She fidgets with her hands, unsure if Margaret will accept her apology or simply walk away. "I didn't realize who you were," Camille continues, her voice cracking with emotion. "But even if I had known, it doesn't matter. I shouldn't have treated you or anyone else the way I did. I've learned a lot these past few weeks, and I know now that I was arrogant. I didn't understand what it meant to really respect people." Margaret nods slightly, her expression softening just a little. "Respect is something that should come naturally," she says gently. "Not because of who someone is or what they've done, but because we all deserve it." Camille swallows hard, nodding along with her. "You're right. I see that now. I've been working as a janitor, and it's given me a lot of time to think about how I've treated people. I see how hard this work is, and how important it is, and I'm ashamed of how I used to look down on it. On everyone." Margaret's gaze softens even more, and for the first time since the incident, Camille sees a hint of warmth in her eyes. "I can see that you're trying to learn," Margaret says, her voice calm. "And that's what matters." Camille feels a wave of relief wash over her, but she knows there's still more she needs to say. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," she adds quickly, "but I promise I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I've changed. I don't want to be that person anymore." Margaret is silent for a few moments, then steps closer to Camille, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Forgiveness isn't always easy, Camille," she says, her voice quiet but kind. "But the fact that you're willing to admit your mistakes and make amends shows me that you're already on the right path." Camille feels tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't expect Margaret to be so understanding, and the kindness in her words hits her harder than she anticipated. "Thank you," Camille whispers, her voice thick with emotion. Margaret gives her a small smile. "Just remember, it's not about perfection. It's about growth. Keep working on yourself, and you'll find the respect you're looking for, not just from others, but from yourself." Camille nods, wiping away a stray tear. "I will," she promises. "I really will." Margaret gives her arm a gentle squeeze before turning back to her shopping. Camille watches her walk away, feeling a mixture of relief and determination. She knows the road ahead will still have challenges, but for the first time in a long while, she feels like she's truly on the path to redemption. Several months pass, and Camille continues her work at the store. She's no longer the haughty cashier who looked down on those around her, but a humbled and quieter version of herself. Each day she cleans, assists customers, and carries out her tasks with a sense of responsibility that she had never known before. Over time, her co-workers begin to see the change in her, and the subtle distance they once kept starts to fade. They offer smiles, greetings, and even small conversations, acknowledging the effort Camille is putting into her work and her attitude. Margaret, too, occasionally comes to the store, watching from afar as Camille works. Though their encounters are brief and polite, Camille can sense that Margaret is observing her progress. Each time Margaret's eyes meet hers, Camille feels a surge of motivation to keep improving, to prove that she is worthy of the second chance she's been given. One day, Antoine calls Camille into his office. The familiar nervousness bubbles up inside her as she steps through the door, but she keeps her head high, determined to face whatever news is coming. Antoine gestures for her to sit down, and she does, clasping her hands in her lap. "Camille," Antoine begins, his tone serious but not unkind. "I've been watching you closely over these past few months. We all have. And I've noticed a real change in you." Camille nods, swallowing hard. "Thank you. I've been trying," she says softly. Antoine leans forward, his hands folded on the desk. "It's clear that you've put in the effort, and not just with the work you've been doing, but in how you treat others. I believe in giving people chances when they show they're willing to learn from their mistakes." Camille holds her breath, unsure of where this is going, but there's a flicker of hope in her chest. "I spoke with Margaret," Antoine continues, "and she agrees. You've earned the opportunity to move back into a role with more responsibility. It won't be as a cashier just yet, but we're offering you a position as a customer service associate." Camille's eyes widen, a rush of relief and disbelief washing over her. "Really?" she asks, her voice barely containing her surprise. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so much." Antoine smiles, a rare expression from the usually stoic manager. "You've earned it, Camille. Just remember, this is a chance to continue proving yourself. Don't forget the lessons you've learned." "I won't," Camille says firmly. "I've learned more in these past few months than I ever thought I would. And I'm going to keep working to be better." As Camille leaves Antoine's office, her heart feels lighter than it has in a long time. It isn't just about the promotion. It's about knowing that she's truly changed. Her journey has been a difficult one, filled with moments of humiliation, self-reflection, and hard work, but it has led her to a place of growth she never thought possible. In the following weeks, Camille takes on her new role with the same humility and care she learned as a janitor. She helps customers with a genuine smile, listens to their concerns, and treats her coworkers with the respect they deserve. The store feels different to her now, not just as a place of work, but as a community she is a part of. The same community she had once looked down on. One afternoon, as she helps an elderly customer bag their groceries, she catches sight of Margaret walking through the store. Their eyes meet, and for the first time, Margaret gives her a warm, approving nod. It's a small gesture, but to Camille, it means the world. She smiles back, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. Camille knows her journey is far from over, but she's ready for whatever comes next. She's learned the true meaning of respect, hard work, and redemption, and she'll carry those lessons with her, not just in the store, but throughout the rest of her life. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and watch this next story. It's incredibly moving.